Today I want to just share with you some of these really cool number dies, and I have some letter dies that Stamps of Life will be selling on HSN. And just real quick, the numbers, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you have the 0, question mark, and exclamation point. And then with your letters, you have all of your letters, and you have an ampersand sign with the letters. So real quick, I just want to show you what these dies look like. So we'll just take one of these numbers right off the bat. So each number has each number and each letter has a shadow die, and it has the actual number. And the number or the letter has these little squares. It's just like a little design on the actual number. So when you see those die cut out, and I die cut a few of them out just so you can see. So here's the numbers. So when it's die cut out, you can either die cut out the shadow. So that would be the shadow of the 5. Or you can die cut out the actual number. And that would be what the number looks like. And you can see that in that number, there are these little squares. You can probably see it better there on the yellow. So these little squares that get cut out with the number. And I went ahead and just die cut just so you can see numbers 1 through 5. And if you wanted to, then you can die cut a different color. I just die cut them out in white. And then you can just layer them on top just like that. Or you can just use the number by itself like this. Or you can use the number by itself if you wanted to, like that. So those are just some different ways. And there's also some other neat ways I want to just show you as well. I did die cut some of the letters. You can see there's a L, an E, an O, and an N. So you can see, again, the little design that it has on it. I didn't die cut the shadows for those. But I just want to show you another neat thing that you can do with these dies. Okay, so I showed you about the shadow layer and the actual layer. You can layer it like that, and that is the N. Or you can also have it cut out something like this. So let me put it against the yellow so you can see. So you can see the N, it actually has just the outline of the N. And in order to get something like that, you would take your dies. So I'll just take the B for example. So you would take your shadow, and you would take the B and you would run it through the die cut machine just like this. And when you do that and you run the two dies together, it will cut out these two pieces, okay? So you would have the outline, and then you would have the piece inside, just like that. Okay, and then if you wanted to layer it on a shadow, you can. So technically you can die cut this in a different color to make it stand out. And I'm going to show you a card that I created that is very similar to that. And that is this particular card where I took the shadow layer of all of these letters and I die cut them out in a pattern paper. And it's a floral print. So that would be the shadow layer, which would be here as an example would have been the N. And then I put the two dies together and it gave me something like this. And then this piece I'm just put aside. I could save it for another project. But what I did is I put the layering piece, that outline, just right on top of the shadow layer to create what looks like an outline. This is an example of a card that I did using the numbers, but it's actually just the numbers die cut out of the paper. So I actually just took a piece of the powdered sugar cardstock, put all my numbers 1 through 5 in a row, and just kind of slanted them a little bit. And then I just die cut it out of the white. So in this case, I just used the actual number and just put them down on a sheet of cardstock and die cut it out. And it left me with, of course, I had the number that I can use for another project, which ended up being this number here. So that actually cuts out, but it actually leaves the 1 in place in the cardstock. And I thought that turned out really, really cute. Okay, and then I have a few other cards where I just used the actual letters themselves. There's no shadow or anything behind it, so this is just the word hello. And I did a Christmas card with the word Noel. So those are just a few ways of using these number dies and the letter dies. So I think, you know, there's all kinds of possibilities for these particular numbers and letters. So I'm going to show you a really quick tutorial of how I did this card as well as this card. That way you can see you know, how to make those two particular cards. These are pretty self-explanatory, just die cut these out, but these are a little bit more complex, so I went ahead and just did a little tutorial, so stay tuned for that. For this card, I'm going to start with the shadow dies. So I picked the letters of the word thanks, and I die cut those shadow dies out of some floral pattern paper, and then I set them aside. And now I'm just taking a piece of guava cardstock. I am putting some double-sided adhesive tape on the back of it, because when you use these dies, you definitely want to have your double-sided adhesive on the back. It just makes things so much easier when you're adhering everything together. So now I'm just going to layer the shadow and the actual letter inside the shadow. I'm layering all of those letters on this guava cardstock, and I'm going to run that through my die cut machine. So again, the shadow layer is placed down, and then the individual letter layer is layered inside of that shadow layer. And when those come out of the die cut machine, you get your outline, which you see there on the left, and then you get your letter, which you see there on the right. So you're going to go ahead and take those outlines. The outlines are what we're using for the guava cardstock. And you're going to take the outline, and it has the double-sided adhesive already, and you're just going to lay it right on top of that shadow layer. And the shadow layer was cut out of the floral paper, and that was from the Darling Collection paper pad, which I don't believe is in stock any longer, but you can find any paper and do the same thing. So take each one of those outlines. Again, they have the double-sided adhesive already, which makes it so much easier. Can you imagine trying to put glue or tape on the back of those if you didn't have the double-sided adhesive already on there? So you're just going to take each one of those outlines out of those letters and apply it to your shadow piece. And I just love how this looks. It just has a nice bold edge around the edge of the letter, and you can see that beautiful pattern paper through it. Now these alphabet dies, they are on sale up on the HSN website at the time of filming this video, and they are called Stamps of Life alphabet dies, and they also come with the double-sided adhesive sheets. So that's a good deal. You actually get your double-sided adhesive. If you don't already have some, you'll be able to use the Stamps of Life double-sided adhesive sheets for these. Now, if you're interested in the number dies are a separate item, and those are the Stamps of Life number and shadow die set. So they are separate. Now, if you happen to go to HSN's website, make sure you type in the search box Stamps of Life, and you'll see all their products come up. Now, if you happen not to see them come up, then that means they're sold out. And I will provide a link to these products over on my blog. So take a look at my description box below. You'll see a link to my blog. You can hop on over there and you can see the link to these products, and hopefully they're still in stock for you to pick them up. Alright, so I'm just about done here with the word thanks, and I've applied all of those outlines to those shadow layers. So now those inside pieces, I'm just going to stick back on that adhesive because I don't need it. I can save it for another project, so I can actually make another card just using the inside pieces. So for here I have a piece of powdered sugar cardstock, and this is cut to 2 by 5 3/8, which is just big enough to fit these letters. And when you're adding these to this piece of cardstock, you want to squeeze them in pretty tight, because I am using an A2 size card base, and if you space them out too far apart, it's not going to fit on this A2 size card base. So try to put them in pretty close together. So I'm just applying glue on the backs because my shadow pieces, I didn't have the double-sided adhesive on the back, because these shadow dies are large enough that you can actually put glue on without having to worry about you know, it going over the edges, because you can see how large that shadow piece is. So here I've went ahead and attached all of these letters to that powdered sugar cardstock, and that powdered sugar cardstock is available up on the Stamps of Life website. And you can see here I'm having to scooch this over because it's not going to go on that back layer. That back layer of pattern paper, that floral print, that is cut to 4 and 5 1/4. And again, that's the same paper pad from the Darling collection that I used for the shadow layers. So I'm just going to add some glue to that, and I'm putting it on a powdered sugar piece of cardstock, which measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then the thanks paper, that is going on to the front of that entire layer. And you can see that some of the cardstock's hanging off the edge, so I'm just going to flip that over, and I'm just going to trim off some of the excess there, and that entire layer will go on a piece of guava cardstock, which is a piece of cardstock cut to an A2 size card base, which the A2 size card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I'm just taking some twine. I do take some guava twine as well as some white twine, and just put those around the top. And I do tie those in a bow, and I'm also going to add a nice flower embellishment over that bow. And to add the flower embellishment, I'm just going to use my hot glue gun, put some glue on there, and stick it right where that knot is on that bow, and that will complete this card. Here's another similar card that I did using just some different colors, and you can see just using the different papers and the different patterns, how it does look a little bit different, but again, it just looks so beautiful. You can see that the outline was done in the white, and the shadow layer was done in a pink as the base with the white flowers. And then for this card, I also just added some more cardstock layers above and below the word thanks to just give it just a few more layers and a little bit more color there. And I also just added some embellishments down at the bottom right hand corner. So just a couple of varieties using those outlines of those letters. So for this card, you're going to take your numbers 1 through 6. These are not the shadow layers. These are the actual number dies with the decorative pattern on them. You're going to lay them out on a strip of white cardstock, and notice that some of them are tilted left, some of them are tilted right, just to kind of give it a little fun effect. And as far as the measurements of this powdered sugar white cardstock, you're really just going to have to just measure it so that it fits exactly the height of these numbers as well as the width of the numbers. I don't have the exact measurements on me because unfortunately I can't find the paper where I wrote them down, and I don't have access to the card at this time of filming, so I'm really sorry about that. I also want to mention that when you're running this through your die cut machine, do not put double-sided adhesive on the back of this. You don't need to, and you'll see why in just a moment. So when this comes out of the die cut machine, you're just going to take those number dies off, and I want you also to notice that each one of those number dies was adhered down with some tape. So you want to definitely make sure you adhere those down, because you're putting these in a nice pattern, because what you're doing is you're actually going to use this top white layer on your card. You're not using those numbers, you're just using that top layer. So next you're going to take a piece of blueberry cardstock, and notice that it's there in the background, and you're just going to add glue to the back side of this numbered piece. And just go very light on the glue, because if you go too heavy when you press it on the blueberry cardstock, it's going to seep through. So just make sure that the blueberry cardstock is big enough to fit that entire strip. Now I do want to add, if you don't have the exact measurements, just make it bigger than the white strip. You can always flip it over, and you can always then cut off the excess, okay? So then you're going to take a piece of decorative paper, The decorative paper is cut to 4 by 5 1/4, and you're just going to lay that at a diagonal on that decorative paper. Now, not all of those numbers are going to fit, okay? So you'll see that I end up cutting off the 6 because that 6 is just not going to work there. And I also cut off the 6 because notice that when I cut out the 6, you also have that big gap in the middle of where there should be like maybe a little oval or something. But anyway, it's perfect anyway because it didn't fit on the card front. So I'm just adhered that down in a diagonal, and I used the ribbon dies, and I die cut a piece of the light blue. It's just a light blue. It came with that pattern paper pad, and I just die cut a strip of that ribbon and just put it at the top and at the bottom, again in the diagonal. Notice that some of that ribbon is also hanging off the edges because I'm just going to flip this over and just cut off the excess just to trim it down to fit that layer. Just make sure when you're adhering your numbers that your 1 is not accidentally off of the side of your card layer, because then you'll end up cutting through your 1, and you don't want to do that, right? So I just think how fun and how cute this actually looks. It's cute for a little kid's birthday. So I'm just going to apply glue to the back of that. I'm going to pop it on a piece of blueberry cardstock that's measured 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and that entire layer is going to go on a piece of powdered sugar cardstock, which is the A2 in size. Now the numbers that came out, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, you can just save those for another project. You're not going to need them on this card. But I do go ahead and take the number 4 and I die cut it out a piece of banana cardstock. I did have the double-sided adhesive on the back of that banana before I ran it through the die cut machine. And then I just popped it in place of where the number 4 is on that card front. And I really think it turned out so cute because you can actually, when you give this to a child for the birthday, just highlight the number of how old they are. So the child for this card would be 4, and I think that turned out really nice. And that banana, it matches the banana going back in that pattern paper. I am using the Foxes, I think it's the Foxes to stamp set. I already stamped out a fox and I colored it up with some markers, and I die cut it out with the shadow dies, and now I'm just putting some double-sided adhesive foam on the back and I'm adding it to my card front. Now I'm just taking a piece of white cardstock and a happy birthday die from the Foxes to stamp set, stamped it onto the white cardstock and just trimming this down. And then I just back that up against some blueberry cardstock and just trim that down as well. That way it has a nice blue border around the happy birthday. And I will adhere the happy birthday to that blueberry cardstock, and then I will add it to my card. And when I add it to the card, I will put some double-sided adhesive foam just to make it pop up a little bit. And that will complete this card. So once again, here are all of the cards that I made using the number and the alphabet dies from the Stamps of Life. Head on over to the HSN's website, search Stamps of Life, and see if they are in stock. You can also head to my blog. The link will be in my description box, and the link to the products will be on my blog. Have a great day. Bye-bye.